what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
This podcast is sponsored by the 2019 Footcandle Film Festival. This year's film festival will be held September 27th through 29th in Hickory, North Carolina. Learn more by visiting footcandlefilmfestival.com.
Footcandle Films. Film news and reviews from two guys who really like movies.
This episode is brought to you by the Footcandle Film Society. For a schedule of upcoming screenings and membership information, visit the Society's website at www.footcandle.org.
Hello and welcome to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. My name is Alan Jackson. I am the co-founder and co-director of the Footcandle Film Society and the Footcandle Film Festival. With me, as always, Chris Fry, the other co on both of those titles, the co-director, co-founder, Footcandle Film Society, Footcandle Film Festival. Great. So just ditto, basically, is the title you have. So great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to talking about the films we've got today. Should be interesting.
It should be an interesting show. We'll kind of tell you about the films here in just a moment. This is our ongoing film discussion and review show here on themesh.tv. We try to put out a couple episodes or so, approximately a month. And during our shows, we will talk about one or two fairly new films that are available in theaters or maybe streaming brand new on demand. And we give you a little reviews and insight into our thoughts on those films, following that up with some movie news. And then we always end up the episode with our picks of the episode, kind of our recommendations, the film we think that maybe is worth your time checking out that you might have missed, or just to bring back to your attention. Could also be a film from the past that we've had a chance to revisit and think is worth your time. So, as Chris mentioned, we do kind of have some interesting ones to talk about in today's show. We've got two films in particular we're going to be reviewing. First up will be the latest from writer-director Quentin Tarantino. It is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Then we'll follow that up with a film that probably less seen than the first one, but it did go straight to online. It's an interesting film we're going to talk about by director Lynn Shelton, and it's called Sword of Trust. So that's going to be the two films for today's episode, Chris. And what do you say we just go ahead and jump right in on the first one?
Let's do it.
All right. So first up is Quentin Tarantino's ninth directed film. It is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I'm Rick Dalton. It's my pleasure, Mr. Schwartz.
Call me Marvin. Put it there. That your son?
No, it's my stunt double, Cliff Booth.
Last night we watched a Rick Dalton double feature. All the shooting. I love that stuff, the killing.
A lot of killing.
Everybody order fried sauerkraut!
So, Chris, since this film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, is kind of exploring kind of the behind the scenes of Hollywood life, especially when it comes to actors, since our main character in the film, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, is an actor, and we get to see a lot of his day-to-day life. I thought it'd be interesting maybe during the setup intro to go behind the scenes of this podcast. Okay,
interesting.
So it gives a little background. People can see behind the curtain of what's involved to make this high production quality show that we do here.
So you're going to let them know about the huge temper tantrum I had right before we sat down to record?
I wasn't going to talk about that, but since you brought it up.
Okay. Fair enough.
We'll get to that on another episode. I think that's worthy of a whole discussion on its own right. No, talking about this show, just so everybody knows who's listening to this, you and I work together in an actual day job.
Yes.
We work in the same building. Yep. We work right now actually next to each other. So honestly, I can just shout through the wall and you can hear me. That's our kind of intercom system we have between our two offices.
True.
So it does make it challenging when we both go see a film that we're going to review, but we're very committed that we're not going to talk about our opinions of that film before we get in front of these microphones right now to discuss them.
Sure. Try to keep it fresh.
Try to keep it fresh. We don't want to let on to whether we liked a film or not, so we keep it kind of on the down low until that time. Both you and I have been eagerly awaiting to see this film. I think early in the year, I think I even said it might have been my most anticipated film of this year.
And I think as soon as the slightest bit of news leaked about this film, it was one of our news items. I mean, we've mentioned it at least 2 or 3 times.
Yes. So it has been an ongoing discussion point for us.
Absolutely.
So you and I don't watch the films together, but we do kind of come into the office, and especially after the weekend that this film came out, we both had a chance to see it. Let me just kind of role play for the audience kind of what our interaction was like. Not being able to talk about what we thought about the film, but just kind of giving some insight.
Okay.
It's like one of us basically says, hi, Pip. So I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood this weekend. The other one would say, yep, I saw it too. And we say, okay, yep. Back and forth, a little bit of that, not tipping our hat. And then this time the mold broke a little bit. And I think one of us, I think it was me, I said, what about that running time? How'd you feel about the running time? It's 2 hours and 45 minutes. I know Chris is not a big fan of long movies.
It's true.
And then you made a little tip about, well, what do you think? There's one scene or one moment or one part of the film that I thought was just bad. At that point, we stopped talking. I don't know what part you're talking about. You don't know my perception of the film. We are still in the dark, but yet we tipped our hat maybe just a little bit more than normal. So,
right.
Here's the thing, Chris. We still haven't dropped our guard. I still don't know what you think about this film. You don't know what I think about it. We weren't fans of Hateful Eight as much. It's probably my least favorite Tarantino film. You were not a big fan.
Have you revisited it?
I have not.
Okay.
Probably should, but right now it's at the bottom of my list.
Understand.
But we were both really intrigued by the premise of this film.
Sure.
Tarantino crafting a story about Hollywood in 1969, a time period we can kind of assume Tarantino is a big fan of.
Yeah.
Talking about an actor working past his prime, which is something that Tarantino has explored in many of his own films by casting people that maybe are a little bit beyond their prime and helping them resurge their career. Well, we're seeing that actually woven into a story about the character that Leonardo DiCaprio plays. We have Leo and Brad Pitt, 2 people who have both been in Tarantino films together, or before, but never together.
Right.
Getting to see them. And then knowing that there's some storyline being woven in that has to do with the Manson family and the Sharon Tate murder, and that added another layer of intrigue to the whole project.
Which I remember originally, I think, back when we first mentioned it on the show, there was no cast. It was basically his next film is going to have something to do with the Charles Manson murders. And
that's all we heard.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, we didn't know how to feel about that.
Right.
So here's where I'm going to kick it off to you, Chris.
Sure.
Quentin Tarantino has said publicly he's making 10 films. This film is considered the 9th film. Now, technically, he counts Kill Bill 1 and 2 as one film. But this is his 9th film in his mind. So this would make it the penultimate film of his film career if he sticks to what he says he's going to do. With all that background setup, everything, all the drama behind the scenes and all the you and I not being able to share our opinions on things, I'm just going to ask you, did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood rebound for you from the Hateful Eight?
Okay.
Despite whatever bad scene or moment you're going to tell us about? Or does Mr. Tarantino have a lot of making up to do to try to make his 10th and final film an actual winner?
Okay.
There we go.
I think that's a good jumping off point. So it definitely was kind of a comeback for me from the Hateful Eight, and actually also from Django Unchained, which I liked, but I just didn't quite resonate with me as much as I thought. And then, Hateful Eight, kind of same thing. I was a little more disappointed in Hateful Eight. So this was more of like a rebound, more of a bounce back. I will say, though, who knows what he's going to do for his 10th film, but because this film is kind of an exercise in looking back and memory and nostalgia about that time period, and, that's kind of what he's always done with some of his characters in his films in general. It always kind of seems to be looking back, whether it's through the soundtrack or just, he tries to reinvent different genres. He's kind of a genre filmmaker. I kind of wish maybe that this had been his 10th film, because I think it would have been kind of the perfect capstone of his career, because it has aspects of a TV Western, which kind of is like Hateful Eight, but it's, it's a TV show instead. It has the multiple different plot stories going on, which is like Pulp Fiction. It jumps around in time a little bit, which is like Pulp Fiction. So, it just, and it has some kind of the coolness of something like Jackie Brown, some of the characters in Jackie Brown have. So
It's a little bit of an amalgamation of a lot of his other films.
It is. And I'm trying to think of how to say that. So I did like the film.
Okay.
You referenced in the intro kind of my misgiving.
Which I'm racking my brain to try to... I desperately want to know what you feel like.
Let me mention it, and then we can discuss some of the... And I want to throw it over to you, and here's what you thought of the film. Without going into too much detail, I will say that the ending of the film, an aspect of it, reminded me too much of Inglourious Bastards.
Okay.
And that shocked me. But I have to say, if you're going to steal from somebody, steal from yourself. I do like Inglourious Bastards a lot. I would probably rate it as maybe one of my top. It's in the top 5 Tarantino films, top 3. It may be my number 1. It's difficult for me to rank.
It is definitely my number 1.
Okay, it's difficult for me to rank films. Films from somebody that I do like his films. So there was an aspect that I kind of felt like he was ripping himself off. Now, we will maybe get into a little bit of spoiler territory later, and I can kind of explain myself a little more. But Alan, what are your initial thoughts?
So I generally like the film.
Okay.
It's probably mid-level Tarantino for me. If I've actually already done my ranking of the films. I know where this falls.
Okay.
This is kind of in that... If you count it as 9 films, or I count it as 10 films, because I think Kill Bill 1 and 2, I see very separately, and I rate very separately.
Well, you saw them separately.
Yeah, so of the 10, I think this is like a number 6, 5 or 6, bouncing around in there. It's the moments it gets right, it gets really, really right. But there's also a lot of moments that Tarantino lost his editor several years back.
I've heard some people complain
Sally
about
Menke,
that.
who was his editor through his first, I think, 7 films.
Okay.
I think Inglourious Bastards might have been the last one she did.
Okay.
She didn't do Django Unchained. She didn't do Hateful Eight. And I kind of felt like we needed an editor, a better editor on this one, just because I do feel like the indulgences went on too much, too long, and didn't really add much to the film. But I will say that the moments they led up to were well worth it. I never felt bored by the film, and I never felt like the film was completely pointless. But I think there were long stretches of time where it was just, he just wants us to be experiencing these characters, and that's great. But there's so many scenes of just people driving. There's so many scenes of just, long scenes of acting, which again, fine. But you just kind of want to say, all right, where is this going to? What am I building up to here?
Okay.
So that's my main takeaway is I just, if it had been a 2-hour, 15-minute movie, kind of tighten up a few of the areas.
Sure.
I probably would have had a much higher opinion of it.
Sure.
But as it was, I felt like it might have gotten a little more indulgent on Tarantino's likes and fetishes and things he likes to put on screen, a little more than maybe we as a viewing public need to be exposed to.
Well, I'll definitely agree that the running time, it wasn't a negative for me, but I was aware of it. Yeah. But I knew going in because I'd heard like, oh yeah, this thing's 2 hours and 45 minutes. I was like, okay, which, you put in previews and stuff, you're looking at 3 hours plus by the time you get out of the theater. And I'll say that I think in a way, some of the things that he spent time on, I'm wondering if some of these are the frustration. There's a sequence of Sharon Tate going to the movie theater.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of people kind of knock that. Not that they got bored, kind of antsy. And I see that, and I have a double-edged sword with that, because what I appreciated was something that I don't think Tarantino really has ever done, for me at least as a viewer, is give me character building without dialogue.
Yeah.
That's what he's known for. And he does a good job. Some people get really annoyed. It's the stylized, heightened dialogue. But it doesn't bother me. I kind of like it. But with Sharon Tate, she never gets that in this film.
Yeah.
But it was an example of showing stuff on screen and just spending time with this person and seeing her get to see a movie that she was in on the big screen. She sits with a theater of people. And just like, I don't know, somehow I felt like it let me get to know this person that you've heard, unfortunately, all the real life details surrounding the latter part of her life. So it was an interesting way to get to know her without making it false by putting a lot of words in her mouth.
Well, I agree. I thought all the scenes with Sharon Tate, which was obviously it was Margot Robbie playing
Right.
but all the Sharon Tate scenes I thought were essential.
Okay.
I mean, I thought, because there again, this is an actress that we didn't get to see the best from, unfortunately, because she was, her life ended so quickly and unfairly in the situation too. Just like anybody in the situation, but getting to spend some time with her, I thought was nice, and it added to the film. All the character development moments. I think first off, I was just going to say I loved every character in this movie.
Okay.
Every character in this movie. Okay. I think Brad Pitt is playing what may be my favorite role of his, maybe, as Cliff Booth. He's the stunt man who is basically a associate of Leonardo DiCaprio's Rick Dalton. He's like his assistant. He's his driver. He's his gopher. And, and just getting to know more about him, even some things that are a little alarming about Mr. Booth that you start to realize, make him a very interesting character. Leonardo DiCaprio as Rick Dalton, I also thought was really well played. Again, I'm not going to spoil too much of the film, but seeing an actor that kind of is starting to realize that maybe he's past his prime, or maybe he's not the hot commodity in Hollywood anymore, and to see someone who's constantly having to play the heavy, the bad guy, the villain in a film or a show, cry at the drop of a hat, emotional about when he thinks about his own career and all. I love that dichotomy of just, someone who's supposed to be so tough on the exterior, but yet so sensitive outside of the camera. Loved how he played that balance of there. So really all the characters we got, my only issue is some of the characters I wish we had more time with.
Sure.
Al Pacino is in the film for basically one or two scenes.
Yeah.
I like what he's doing. I like
sure.
his character, but you don't really see him that much. He's kind of gone after the first 20 minutes.
And then he comes back a little bit towards the end.
For like one little moment or two, but that's
quick.
about it. There's a lot of great characters, and I think even for a 2 hour and 45 minutes movie, we don't get a lot of time with many of them outside of the three that we're really following. Yeah, I got some other actors and actresses I want to kind of point out a little bit later too, but let me just ask you in general all right, we're not going to spoil the ending, but let's just talk about the ending as a concept. I think it's okay to say that the last 20 minutes, there's a turn. And I'm just going to ask you if you felt like that turn was warranted, if you felt like it was earned or deserved, or do you feel like it was a little bit of a cop-out or maybe kind of a cheap way to end the film? And again, we won't go into details of spoiling. I just want to get your thoughts in general. Because the ending's very divisive for a lot of people, I will say.
Did I think it was earned? Sure. And it's not. The ending is the part I have a problem with. And
is it?
And it's because of. I feel like he's ripping off Inglourious Bastards, and without going into too much detail, I can't really explain.
All right,
why.
well, let's table that for the spoiler then.
But it doesn't. I think, I've said before, which is the overall, because it was the ending of the film, it kind of made me cranky. But I've said before, like, the cinematic yardstick of a good film is 3 good scenes and no bad ones. And when I reflected afterwards, my initial kind of like, I didn't like gasp when it started, but I was kind of like, oh, this is where we're going. And I was just really disappointed. So it wasn't anger.
I think I'm getting an idea what you're talking about.
It was just disappointment.
Okay.
But when I reflect, I'm like, well, that wasn't a bad scene. And the number of good scenes in this film are just so many. The ones that come to mind, Rick Dalton having a smoke break with a precocious young child.
Oh, and she was so good, too.
And she was good. And just they're having a smoke break on set. That was one of my favorite scenes. So good. Cliff Booth's talk with George Spahn.
And on the Spahn family, the Spahn Ranch.
Yes, and specifically, it is a throwaway line, but done by Bruce Dern. I'll just go ahead and throw that out there. But he says, "You coming here and seeing me today has made my day." Like there was some, and that it's like an old person, authentic. Like in the midst of all this Tarantino craziness, to me, that actually kind of gut punched me because it was so what I felt true. And he's like, okay, I'm going to roll over and go back to sleep. So then it was immediately kind of dismissed.
And the fact that was at kind of within a very tense, well-crafted, long scene.
Right.
It was not the ending of the scene you expected from the build-up at all.
No.
But I think that was part of the point, is we were expecting something to go one way. Instead, we end up with a much different cap to the scene. So, yeah.
So I really like that. And then, even though it had kind of been a little bit ruined in the trailer, the flashback sequence to the Green Hornet set.
Oh, yeah.
I liked.
No, it was it was funny. It was interesting. The whole scene. Yeah, they spoiled a little bit of the trailer, but the full scene actually, I think, takes a little more interesting. It's a little more interesting turn to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. I'm with you on those same scenes.
So tell me, without there again, we won't get to spoilers yet, but without doing that, what's your take on kind of the final act, shall we say?
I will say I liked it a lot.
Okay.
I did. I think I know where you're coming from, and I'll be anxious to get more detail. I think I know what your concern is with it, or some of your disappointment. Yeah, I kind of expected, knowing that we're going to be looking at a real-life event in a certain period of history. Yeah, I kind of knew going in that there may be some modifications being made on things, and I think I kind of went in with that expectation. So that's why it didn't disappoint me as much.
I see.
On things where I could say I could have been disappointed if I had not already kind of mentally thought that was going to be the case.
Okay.
So yeah. Let me call out a couple more things I thought were really great about the film. Margaret Qualley, she stars as one of the Manson family dwellers.
Sure.
Has the nickname Pussycat. She is actually the daughter of Andy McDowell, which I didn't even know until way after the film. Grew up in Asheville, North Carolina, just up the road from us.
Okay.
I had never seen her in anything else, but she has some great dialogue scenes with Brad Pitt that I thought worked really, really well. And just she was a very energetic performance, very just captivating, I thought, pretty early on. I thought Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate was really good.
I would agree.
I think some people have criticized the lack of her dialogue in the film. I don't. I think she did just as much performing without dialogue, and I thought her whole role was great. And there are several others. And so Julia Butters was the young girl that played Trudy, the other actor, alongside Rick Dalton in the scene you were talking about during the smoke break. She was the one, the young child that had a really great dialogue scene with Leo DiCaprio. I mean, even Luke Perry's in the film and has a short clip, which is, unfortunately he passed away since the film was shot, but it was great to see him on screen, and it was a very small role, but very fun role. So overall, I think the film was good. I think there were many scenes that were great. I liked the ending, but I will say that my big takeaway is I just felt like some of the scenes just in the in-between scenes just went on a little too long without much of a point to them, other than let's show as many cars from the 1969 period as we can, or let's make sure when we show Leo acting in a Western that we get to see all the scene he does, which, again, it was fun to see him playing an actor playing somebody else.
Sure.
But, some of the things just kind of went really long. And I think the film could have accomplished just as much, a little shorter, but it's worth it. I mean, I would not say it's not worth sitting through the whole film. It's absolutely worth it for many of the scenes you've mentioned, and so the performances, which I think are all great.
Well, and despite you mentioned how I often complain about running time. Normally, that's one of my number one complaints. I was aware of it, but I immediately want to see this film again.
Yeah,
I was hoping to be able to see it a second time before we reviewed it, just to see, now that I know how everything's going to play out, how I felt about it. But I do think, he has a very interesting filmography. Maybe it's not his best film, but it's definitely worth seeing. I am curious as to how he's going to wrap up his career.
Well, yeah, right, because, there were so many moments that, if you really think about it, are such callbacks to other films.
Yeah.
There are several Inglourious Basterds kind of references. I think I saw a couple on Django Unchained, since Western seemed to be the genre that Rick Dalton was kind of well known for.
Right.
There's, Jackie Brown. I think there's some great references to things that you could see connections there. So, and it being about Hollywood, which is kind of Quentin Tarantino's, that's his thing, Mm-hmm. So, I'd be really curious to see what he actually envisions as a 10th film if this was not the final film. So, yeah. Cool. Well, do we want to break into a spoiler and talk about the ending?
Sure.
Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to play a little bit more of the trailer.
Okay.
So people will know this is now us going into spoiler category. So here we'll play a little bit more of the trailer and come back in just a second.
Seems this world got you down. You're feeling bad vibrations.
All right. So we're back and we are going to talk spoilers about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So if you have not seen the film, you need to go ahead and keep skipping ahead because we're ruining it for you right here. Let me just set up the scene, and then I want to hear your thoughts on it. So we go about 2 hours and 15 minutes into the film with very little development on the whole Manson side of things. We are introduced throughout the film to people on the Manson ranch.
We see Charles Manson.
We see Charles Manson in a couple quick scenes. But, overall, we're still following Rick's acting career. And then we find out that he goes to Italy to work on some Italian Westerns. Then when he comes back, that's when I think the last 30 minutes of this film kind of goes at a much quicker pace.
Yes.
With a narrator, which we didn't really have early in the film. But this narrator, I think he dropped in one time for one bit of narration early in the film.
Right.
But then he came back for this last 30 minutes. It was kind of like, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. Basically, the ending is we learn that, just like happened in real life, four becoming three members of the Manson family decide to go into the part of the neighborhood where Sharon Tate lives and has three people over at her house at the moment. In real life, those are the four individuals that were murdered. The difference, the little twist that we have here is that Rick Dalton actually encounters them and has a little altercation with them about the noise of their car.
While drinking margaritas from a pitcher.
That's right. And so they kind of change their plans a little bit and say, let's just get rid of anybody in this Hollywood area. And they end up going into his house, where we have Cliff Booth, played by Brad Pitt, who had just enjoyed it was a cigarette, LSD laced cigarette.
Right.
So he was already kind of having a little bit of his own trip. And the Manson family attackers come in and instead try to kill him. But instead, he and his trusty dog dispose of them fairly violently.
Yes.
And then we get one of them that goes out to the pool, and Rick Dalton gets to dispose of that one fairly violently. So all three of them are gone.
I love the dog, by the way.
The dog is awesome. Sharon Tate's alive. Her guests are alive. One of the guests goes out to see what had happened next door, and he talks to Rick, and he invites Rick up to go hang out with them, which Rick has always pined to be part of the Hollywood elite and be welcomed back in. So that was his kind of welcoming back in.
Earlier in the film, he sees Roman Polanski going into
he
the
knows
driveway.
they live right next door to him. So,
he's aware.
So that's the ending. It is revisionist history, which I'm assuming is the thing that you have an issue with.
Absolutely.
Because Inglourious Basterds was also revisionist in that they murdered Hitler during an ambush at a theater before he went too far down committing a lot of the atrocities he did in his life.
And that in a nutshell, that's it. And the thing is, it was the knockout punch. It was revisionist history, which he'd already done in Inglourious Basterds. Mm-hmm. So he was repeating himself then. But if somehow he had just changed it and not incorporated the stereotypical Quentin Tarantino trademarked violence, if he hadn't incorporated that with all the grisly deaths of the Manson family members, then maybe it was like he was doing that, which was equivalent to frying the Nazis and killing him. It was just too... He was revising history, and he was doing it in the same way that he did in Inglourious Basterds. So I did an eye roll. I was like, oh, okay, eye roll. This is where you're going. And I was disappointed. Now, that being said, I don't know why I didn't go in with more of an understanding of that was going to happen, because you see the title of the movie, Once Upon a Time, ... in Hollywood. So it's like, okay, this is a fairy tale.
Yeah.
This is not real life. But the whole movie, he's a provocateur. He gives you dates, he gives you times, and then that really ramps up, like you're saying, in the last 30 minutes. You're like, this impending sense of dread that, okay, now we're going to have to see Sharon Tate brutally murdered. So am I glad that I didn't have to see that on screen? Absolutely. But I just wish there had been a way to maybe creatively change events without doing it in such a brutal fashion that just mirrored Inglourious Basterds too much.
So it wasn't really the revisionist history that you had as much a problem with. It's the fact
I
that
was glad to not see somebody get
It was the fact that it was history was revised by violently murdering the people that would have been the ones committing the crime.
Right.
Just like we
Just
saw
like
Adolf Hitler and the Nazis were brutally murdered inside the theater in Inglourious Basterds. Okay.
So that was it, you know?
Well, you could actually argue Django Unchained is a little bit revisionist too, because I think the whole goal was to kind of turn a little bit of the slavery on its head a bit. Not quite as overtly.
See, that makes me hate this film even more because it wasn't just the second time. But if you look at it that way, it's the third time. I didn't consider Django to be revisionist just because they weren't based on real people. Yeah. So I was like,
okay, that's true. Yeah. There's not an exact moment or date that he was revising. You're right. It's probably not a fair comparison.
But I understand what you're saying. It's like getting revenge.
I just get the impression that Tarantino says, you know what, if I can. There are things I'm passionate about or feel like were atrocities in our society that I wish I could go back and write if I had the power to do so. Mm-hmm. Nazis and what they did, especially under Hitler's rule, slavery, and because he's such a fan of old Hollywood, and I think the classic style Hollywood, many people say the murder of Sharon Tate kind of ended the golden age of Hollywood. So if he could go back in time and fix it to where that never happened, he would be much happier, and I'm okay with that. I mean, that's as a filmmaker, he's entitled to have that opinion of that. Now, the way in which he revised the history with the use of violence, okay, I could see, yes, it was a little repetitive. I will say this. The crowd I was with.
Oh, I can imagine in the right crowd.
Thursday night, opening night of this film, it was pretty insane.
I can imagine.
Because it is 15 minutes of just nonstop.
Tarantino stylized violence.
It was funny and shockingly violent all at the same time. I think Brad Pitt, that performance by Brad Pitt in those last 10 to 15 minutes was perfect. I mean, absolutely perfect. I could watch his performance after he's actually taken the LSD cigarette. Was so good through the end of the film. Right. So anyway, it was a turn. I actually remember thinking to myself about 2 hours in this film, it's like, I don't think I've seen a drop of blood yet.
Sure.
I don't think I've seen anybody get shot yet. This is a really weird Tarantino film at this point. And I just knew something was coming, and I was hoping it was not a recreation of the actual murders.
Right, and
I think,
as far as tone and tone management, he was playing me like a violin because the whole time I liked the movie, but I had this impending dread that, oh my gosh, I know that he shows violence. He doesn't stray away from that. I really don't want to see that.
In all honesty, the film was a relatively light and breezy film. I mean, the most serious issue we're dealing with is Rick Dalton thinking he's not a big movie star anymore. That was really it. I mean,
and the instances of violence. I'm curious about what you think about this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we mentioned at the end of the film, there is a hint out at the ranch when Brad Pitt goes to visit the movie ranch. He does beat up a guy.
Yeah, no, that's true. You're right. That is the one kind of. There was a lot of violence in that scene I'd forgotten about.
And one other thing, since we're in spoiler territory, and this isn't. We could have brought this up in the review. What do you make of Cliff Booth and whether or not of his marriage?
Well, okay.
What do you make of that?
I thought it was fascinating.
I think that's the fascinating thing that not many people are talking about because it dawned on me and I asked my wife.
No, but I love.
What do you think about that? Yeah. Do you think he's accused? People mention in the film that he killed his wife.
No, I've got my theory on it. I know what happened.
Let's hear it.
The shot is so intentional. We're watching him on a boat. His wife is it's Rebecca Gayheart, by the way, so actress that used to be on TV a lot.
And she is
Tarantino's playing her as a real tough case.
Yeah. Just nagging, being really mean.
You see him sitting there. You get the sense he feels a little browbeaten. I don't know. We have no idea of whether what he's done to deserve it, or if he's deserved anything.
Can you tell
or not.
both are drinking?
There is some drinking involved, and what the scene is so carefully laid out.
Is the boat also kind of like on choppy water?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And actually, I'm watching very carefully.
Okay.
He has a harpoon gun that he's using for fishing.
Yes.
And he's got it in a position like he's pointing it away. And then as she's going on, he just kind of lets the harpoon sit on his knee or on his leg, it looks like.
Okay.
But it just happens to be pointing at her. But the moment the scene cuts away before we see what happens, the boat hits something and kind of bumps up a little bit, just right at the last moment of the frame. Okay. Almost like we're led to believe that they hit a wave.
Yep.
And it just caused him to trigger that harpoon gun just so enough to shoot her. I love the ambiguity of it, that we don't know whether he intended to do it or was truly an accident.
I think that scene is one of the most genius things Tarantino's ever done, because basically, I referenced the Green Hornet scene where it flashes back and he's, the Christ scene. Well, he had experienced his problems in that because some people didn't want him on set because he was known to have supposedly rumored to have killed his wife.
What was so great
but
is
they never say, and so then it's like all about things that you don't know for sure, but you're just casting an evil eye on this person because you have no idea. It's just, this is the rumor, and so therefore that person's cast out. You see that scene, and afterwards I thought about it. You don't even know if that is when his wife died. All they do is show you this scene. His wife could have died at their house, and then there was a mystery around, did he kill her? You don't know, but you are making judgments on that person, like the people on the Green Hornet set were making judgments, and you don't know.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so awesome because after I asked my wife, and she really loves the Cliff Booth character, and afterwards I was like, now, you realize he killed his wife, right? And she's like, oh, yeah, I guess he did. I was
like, oh, yeah, that.
But then I was like, but did he? And then we started having this debate about it. She's like, no, I think that they were drunk or whatever, and then he did shoot the harpoon gun. I'm like, we don't know that.
They never show us. They never tell us, and nobody ever gives specifics about the situation. What I love about it is
I think that's one of the most brilliant things.
We were made to just love this character because he's so laid back and so cool, and just, I mean, Brad Pitt's like in his lower 50s and still looking sharp and just dressing cool, and he's a stunt guy and he's the best buddy, and he's such a good friend to Rick. You know, he's the one that's bringing beers over so they can watch Rick's performance on a TV show. But yet, when you drop that little piece of information, and it's by no less but then Kurt Russell is the one that kind of clues us in,
right? Because
he's the stunt coordinator on set, and he's like, "Nah, I don't want Cliff in there because he brings a lot of baggage to the set,"
right?
Which I think was kind of funny too.
And because his
Kurt
wife
Russell, who played
Stuntman
Mike in Death Proof,
right?
So
Which
Zoe
Bell was the other person that was
played his wife, right? Yeah, a lot of connections there.
Yeah.
So, I thought Cliff Booth was a really fascinating character, and I loved how Brad Pitt played him as well. So
it's interesting, kind of as a summary, the thing that I think you and I are kind of on the same page, running time and editing decisions or lack thereof seemed to be your big holdup.
Yeah.
Whereas my big holdup was just the fact I felt like he was ripping himself off.
Right, which that didn't bother me.
Right.
I was okay with that. It's the editing. I just wish it had been a little tighter. I just felt like, Tarantino was basically saying, look, I love this time period. I want to soak it in and show as much as possible.
Right.
And that's great. But at the same time, it's a work of art that's meant for people to consume and watch. And, it could have accomplished equally as impressive and done just as much with the great scenes with a little less of those in-between flourishes that just seem to drag the film on in a few places. So, yeah. But, I mean, it's top 5 Tarantino, which for me is really good.
Sure.
Inglourious Bastards is 1. I'll go ahead and say it's my absolute favorite. Pulp Fiction's 2. Kill Bill Volume 1 is number 3.
Okay.
I will say that I think I like Django a lot better than you. So I thought Django is maybe 4 or 5, and I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is either that 4 or 5 slot there as well.
Okay.
Then you go Kill Bill Volume 2, which I thought was a disappointment after the first volume. Jackie Brown's one I need to catch back up with.
See, I really like Jackie.
I know, and everybody else does too. And it's been years since I've seen it. I need to go back. I'm sure upon a reevaluation, I'll probably appreciate it more. But unfortunately for me, Death Proof and Hateful Eight, and, I like Reservoir Dogs. I do. It's just not one of the top 5 or 6 for me. I think his later work is better than his first work. But Hateful Eight and Death Proof are definitely, for me, in those bottom 2 slots. Death Proof just didn't work for me.
I feel about Hateful Eight the way you do about Hollywood is that I liked it, but I think it was an editing problem. If you just cut out a lot of stuff and made it tighter.
I still think his last 3 films have all been edited. I think Django was a lot longer than it needed to be. Django had a lot of the same thing for me as this film, which is some wonderful scenes, wonderful moments, great performances, but it just needed to be tightened up. So I again say I think Pulp Fiction was edited perfectly. I think Inglourious Basterds edited perfectly. So we've lost something. Unfortunately, Sally Menken she passed away, unfortunately, years ago. And, I think he's still struggling to get somebody who can help him really take his vision, his film, and put it into a package that really just sings and flows all the way through. So, but again, compared to other things we see in the theater, this is still well above on the entertainment scale and fascination scale. And the fact that we have so much to talk about it with, especially even in the spoiler territory, makes it worthwhile to see no matter what.
Sure.
We didn't even really talk too much about Leonardo DiCaprio, but I thought he was really good in this.
I thought him and Brad Pitt were just, like, you mentioned a lot about Brad Pitt, but yeah, they were both really good.
I will say this. It was a great bromance film. Seriously. Yeah. These 2 guys are such good friends in the film all the way through the end. And,
and that was something that prior to those 30 minutes, Dalton's career's kind of going on the skids. He's gone to Italy. He ends up getting married, and it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to have to make some changes. Kind of like I'm basically going to maybe kind of retire or whatever. Hey, sorry, Cliff. But I think – and I was worried because we were entering that last year. I was like, wait, is Cliff Booth then going to become this murderer or something?
That's what I was fearful of when he went to the Spawn Ranch. I'm like, all right, is he going to get indoctrinated into this group? And then because Cliff cuts him loose, because DiCaprio cuts him loose, he kind of loses it. I mean, I'm so glad they didn't go that route. So, but no, they stuck to that character. Despite all the whatever he's been through in his life, which it sounds like he's been through quite a bit.
He's been through a lot.
I mean, he's living in a little trailer behind a drive-in theater, fixing macaroni and cheese, which people online have noted. Fixing macaroni and cheese, and I don't think he put any milk or water in it. I think he honestly just mixed in the noodles and the cheese powder.
Nice.
He's a fascinating character. I would actually watch a whole nother movie about Cliff Booth's career at this point. So, yeah. All right. Well, that is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm sure Chris and I will still be talking quite a bit even after this recording is done on this show. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. So feel free to drop us any notes, questions, or opinions on the film as well. We'd love to hear from you. We'll tell you at the end of the episode how you can do that. But, Chris, let's move on to a different film. Our second review of the episode. It is the latest by writer and director Lynn Shelton, starring Marc Maron. It is Sword of Trust.
What you are looking at is a genuine relic that supports the actual truth, which is the South won the war.
Okay. The South won the war?
That's right. This is something you want to keep under your hat till you're ready to
Seems like pretty big news.
Best way to do this is through concrete evidence.
Is this antique roadshow for racists?
Up to 50,000.
So, in Sword of Trust, Cynthia receives her inheritance from her grandfather, an antique sword that is believed, at least by her grandfather, to be proof that the South won the Civil War. Cynthia, unsure what to do with this new acquisition, visits a pawn shop whose owner is Mel, played by Marc Maron. Mumblecore is a genre of small-budget indie film with naturalistic acting and dialogue that's sometimes improvised. Another hallmark of this genre is that they emphasize dialogue over plot. The director of Sword of Trust, Alan, as you mentioned, Lynn Shelton, is best known for films like Laggies, Your Sister's Sister, and Hump Day, and is often classified as a mumblecore director. Does this film stray from the genre she's so closely associated with? And whether it does or not, does that work to the film's detriment, or does it make it better for straying, or not?
I'm not able to answer that question because I have never seen any of the other films that Lynn Shelton has directed.
So this is your first exposure to
Absolutely.
Lynn Shelton's work?
I have not seen Hump Day. I have not seen Your Sister's Sister. None of those.
Even though I recommended Laggies on the show, you did not check it out.
Chris,
the world has no meaning.
Every recommendation you pose, I put on a big list on the wall in my house. I worship that list, and I work nothing but my entire life to watch every film you've recommended. I just hadn't got to that one yet. Okay,
I feel much better.
Good. No, this is my first Lynn Shelton film.
Okay.
Now, she's done a lot of TV episodes that I have seen of shows that I watch. I know that Glow, for example, on Netflix, she did some episodes of that. And
also
a couple
starring Marc Maron.
Yes, exactly. So I had a little bit of experience with her director style, but this whole mumblecore concept, not so much. This is a little new for me. So I'll go ahead and say I thought this film was absolutely hilarious. I love this film. Yes.
Wow.
I did. It's slight, it's simple, but I loved every character in it. I just thought it was I found myself busting out laughing more than I have in a film in quite a while.
Wow. Well, that's refreshing to hear, because I think maybe I suffer from the fact that, I put them in my intro, so kind of hints to the fact that I'd seen them. And yes, I have seen all three of those. The reason to watch this film for me was Marc Maron.
Yes.
He single-handedly makes it worthwhile. Yes, he is basically playing himself, the curmudgeon with the barbed tongue that he does in everything. He plays the same type of character, not a pawn shop owner, but in Glow, he's kind of the cranky guy in that too. He's good at what he does.
Marc Maron doesn't have a lot of range, but the role he plays extremely well.
Yeah, so I really liked him in this film, but where it kind of fell apart was where I felt like I could see improvised nature, maybe on some of the supporting cast, vamping with him, and how I don't know, it just didn't work for me.
Wow.
And I felt like it was kind of, the political message is not too heavy-handed. I mean, you kind of get it in the intro, you kind of know where it's going. But still, I felt like it was kind of like a one-note joke that didn't go.
Oh, it totally was a one-note joke.
Right.
It's a simple film. I mean, there's really, you gave the plot summary, and there's not a lot more beyond that. Everything takes place in basically two locations, I think.
The pawn shop and then
the farm.
Yeah.
At the end. That's it. And, we've got the characters, these four characters that kind of get intertwined. There's a couple other characters that have a little more significant screen time, and that's about it. It's a very small, simple film. But I will say I found the plot to be really interesting and funny. And I thought, again, I'm watching this just for reactions and dialogue and being posed some really interesting situations. When you have a character whose name is Hogjaws, played by Toby Russ, who I've got to throw out there as I've never seen this guy do anything else before, but God, he was really good. And, and he, I won't go into plot details too much because it's later in the film, but the role he plays and the interactions he has with the four main characters, and I don't know, it worked for me. I just had a blast with this film. I thought it was really, really fun.
So
maybe if I'd seen the other ones, I would have a little more critical view of this one, but I just, Michaela Watkins plays one of the four main characters along with Jillian Bell. I think they're both really funny together, and I like their characters. And I got to give a MVP to John Bass as Nathaniel, who is Mel's assistant in the pawn shop. Every reaction from this guy, every bit of dialogue, I thought was just hilarious. And they have a dialogue later in the film about whether or not the world is flat that I thought was just funny, really good. So,
and I think. Yeah, and I think the problem was I felt like I could see a lot of the improv coming through, and maybe it wasn't, because you never know. I just know that there's a tendency in films that are of hers that she tends to do that, and like Mark Duplass is in the same school, kind of like they do a lot of improv stuff. So I don't know. I felt like it was showing a little bit, and the runtime, since we have talked about that with
nice.
Hollywood.
Hour 26.
Right. And I felt like if some of that, it could have been trimmed back even more because I felt like it was just kind of, hitting the same joke over and over. But
it worked.
It's not a bad film, but to me it was very slight.
Wow.
And I was surprised there wasn't a little bit more than that. And if it had just been somebody else and not Marc Maron, I would probably rank this film lower. But the fact that he was in it and just kind of knocking it out of the park.
Oh,
as far as
he was great. He was so good, so entertaining, and there is a subplot in the film that is a little more serious. It's he and his. You didn't like that?
No, it's terrible.
No, and now Lynn Shelton played his former, former love interest.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that to me, I was like, even though I've seen her films, I don't think I've ever been aware. She may have been in all the films I mentioned. I don't know. But something about that, I was just like, it's just kind of throwaway. And then how it's like hinted at again at the end, I'm like, ugh.
No, it totally worked.
Eye roll. And then when I saw it was her, I was like, ugh.
Well, okay, so here's I'm going to take a little more philosophical view of this film. Sword of Trust.
You may be the only person that takes a philosophical
Sword of Trust. Even the title. The film is dealing with a sword.
Yes.
A sword that is found and is going to be pawned, and then they find out it may be worth more than they expected, and all the things that come out of that.
Now, I do like what'd you say the girl's name with the blonde hair? What's
Jillian Bell playing Cynthia.
Okay, yeah. So Cynthia, yeah. Cynthia's what she ends up doing with the sword. At the end of the film, I really like that.
Well, I think that
to me wasn't an eye roll.
That speaks to the bigger. The film's title, Sword of Trust.
Right.
It is about basically at the end of the day, we're treated to really 6 characters that have interactions with one another, and 7 varying levels of trust that have to be given on all sides.
Right.
You've got Michaela Watkins and Jillian Bell as Mary and Cynthia. There's a level of trust between the two of them. That's very strong. You've got Marc Maron and John Bass as Mel and Nathaniel in the pawn shop, and there's some sense of lack of trust there. You've got Marc Maron as a pawn shop owner where you get right off the bat that there's probably not a lot to trust in him necessarily at first either. And then, of course, you got the people that they're interacting with that they're trying to deal with on the sword, played by Dan Bacadal and by Toby Huss, who I mentioned. The lack of trust and not knowing who to trust on things. I mean, I get it. And then we get a closing scene that is a break from the rest of the film. The rest of the film's a lot of dialogue and it's lighter and funnier, except for a couple of moments where they get a little serious. But for the most part, it's pretty light.
Right.
And then you get to an ending that's meant to be a little more touching. But if you weave into this whole idea of this trust, if maybe Mel's character, whether or not he's learned a bit of a sense of trying to trust someone or not that he couldn't trust earlier. I don't know. It kind of works. So I got a lot more out of it. I thought it was fun. And it's a very slight movie. I mean, there's not a lot of deep things going on, but I think the couple of messages it tries to hit, I think are good. And I think it's worth watching just because I thought the dialogue was really funny, really great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, sounds like you like it a little more than me.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I thought it was a fun movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is Sword of Trust. I know it's showing at a few theaters, but the great thing is it came right straight online. So people like us that wouldn't have got to see it in a theater here locally because it would not have played around here, we got to see it pretty much when it opened online as well. So that is Sword of Trust by writer and director Lynn Shelton. And so we've capped off our 2 reviews. We had Sword of Trust and we had Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Chris, we're going to take a quick little break, and when we come back, we will do our movie news, and we'll also move right into our recommendations for the episode. So stay tuned. You're listening to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Andrew Moose from the Street Circle Drive podcast here on The Mesh. Interested in promoting your business to an online audience? Your ad could be right here. Consider advertising on the Mesh Podcast Network. Head over to themesh.tv for details.
Welcome back to Footcandle Films here on themesh.tv. This is Alan and Chris here with the Footcandle Film Society. We just finished our reviews of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and our review of the online film Sword of Trust earlier in this episode. Both of us are high on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. couple of misgivings, but overall felt like it was a worthwhile film and a great entry into Tarantino's oeuvre. But then Sort of Trust, we're a little more split on. Chris felt was maybe a little disappointing, not as much as he wanted, where I had a really good time and thought it was a lot of fun and enjoyed it quite a bit. So, Chris, why don't we toss right over to you, because I believe you have some news items to share with us for this episode. This is Chris's news.
That's
we
right.
need like a special intro theme song or something.
I'm giving
him,
Alan a break this episode.
I didn't have to do any research this week,
go.
which is nice. So
don't
go
worry.
for it. What do you got to talk about with us today?
Alan, they are making a Barbie movie.
Yes, I've heard that.
Okay. Now, have you heard that Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach are co-writing it?
Yes.
Okay.
Surprising.
And have you heard that Margot Robbie is starring?
Yes.
Okay. and that Gerwig may also direct. They haven't actually nailed that down yet.
It's still a lot to process. I mean,
It is, but if anything can get me to watch
absolutely.
a Barbie movie,
Yeah.
everything that I just revealed. Yes.
So Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig,
Mm-hmm.
they last worked together on, was it Miss America?
Mistress America
Mistress
or
America.
Frances Ha. Or they may have done both of those
I think they did
together.
both of those films.
Okay.
So Mistress America and Frances Ha, they worked together on. Greta Gerwig, of course, recently directed Lady Bird that got Oscar nominated for Best Picture. No, maybe I don't. Maybe Best Director.
Sure.
I
We'll
don't
stick
remember.
the intern on that.
Yeah, I
I'll
don't
have to
remember.
do the
But it
research.
got a lot of award
Yes,
recognition.
absolutely.
So a Barbie movie. Now, at one point in
It's
earlier
apparently
production,
actually been in
it's in development for a long time.
long time.
I remember when, oh my gosh, I'm having an older senior moment here. The comedian that was in Trainwreck, Amy Schumer, was attached to it. They were going to go a little bit tongue-in-cheek, kind of her playing against typical Barbie stereotype and having a film like that.
Gotcha.
And that didn't go anywhere. So now I'm really curious what they're going to do about this. So a Barbie movie directed by Noah Baumbach, who is already, has a very his films have a lot of biting humor, but also uncomfortable drama situations, family dynamics, a lot going on there. And then Greta Gerwig, who I think can do comedy, and she's a funny person, but is this going to be a comedy? Is it going to, I don't know.
I mean, you would think so because of,
The concept of Barbie as a, as
a child's toy.
Right.
But yeah, don't know. But
No,
if anything
I'm
could get me to go
fascinated.
see it.
It's going to be very, very interesting. So is Baumbach doing anything before that? And
The last thing that we discussed they did was the Meyerowitz Chronicles, and I don't know if he...
Which I liked quite a bit.
Yeah, I liked it.
I see that right now, I've got my information pulled up. The Meyerowitz Stories was 2017. He is writing... Oh, sorry. Let me look at director. So, okay, so he's not signed on to direct Barbie.
Correct.
He's screenplay. I'm sorry. My mistake there. It could be Greta Gerwig directs it. Possibly.
She has not yet. Possibly, yeah.
He doesn't really have anything else on his slate. Right now, it's got Greta Gerwig listed as director on IMDb.
So they have,
And Noah Baumbach as a screenplay writer. So we will see. He does have one film called Marriage Story that he's directing. That's supposed to be released in the next year. So, fascinated.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. If anything can get me to go see it. If people say it's the slightest bit good, I'll
So
throw down
you
my
heard it
money.
right here. We will be reviewing
The Barbie
movie at some point in the future. So
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll move on from that to something that I 100% know that you are aware of. And most people that listen to this show probably have somewhat of an interest in comic book movies. Otherwise, you would just tune out on 80% of the reviews we do for the show.
It's what's in theaters. I can't control that.
It
So,
is. And apparently, according to what they talked about, the news coming out of Comic-Con for Marvel Phase 4.
Are you really going to open up this door for me?
We have these titles, and I want to know which one, if Alan said only one of them can survive. So this is like Shark Tank.
Okay, only one can survive.
This is Shark Tank for these films.
Okay.
Which one's going to survive?
Got it.
Okay. We have Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which is going to be by the same director, which I forget his name.
Scott Derrickson.
Okay. Benedict Cumberbatch is going to return. Now, what could sway your vote here is that supposedly it's going to be kind of a horror film.
That's what I understand.
Okay.
Yes.
So next up, we have Thor: Love and Thunder, directed by Taika Waititi. Hemsworth's returning. Natalie Portman is going to be a female Thor.
Yes.
So there you
Straight
go.
from the comics. That is a storyline that, yes.
So next up, we have Eternals, directed by Chloe Zhao of The Writer, with Angelina Jolie and Kumail Nanjiani as two of the people associated with that movie. And I don't know which part of the lore they're adapting, but at one point, my favorite writer in the world, Neil Gaiman, actually wrote a series of the Eternals.
He did.
I don't know if that's the one they're going to adapt.
That was the version of the Eternals where I believe they were living in New York City, and it was them kind of realizing that they were actually Eternals. It was
So I don't know if that's the one they're going to do or not, but I sure hope it is because I love the work that dude does. Okay, then for some, it's the long-awaited Black Widow standalone movie. It's going to have Scarlett Johansson reprising her role, but it's also going to have Rachel Weisz and Florence Pugh, who you just recently talked about in Midsommar.
Yeah.
So there you go for Black Widow.
You got one more film. You forgot one film.
Oh, no. I debated on it. I was like, well, you've mentioned all the other ones. You've got to mention this one. So Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Yes, right.
With Tony Leung.
The first Asian lead, in a film, which will be great. So,
and then directed by the guy who did Short Term 12.
Yes.
Destin Daniel Cretton. So there you go.
All right, so 5 films, and you want me to tell me which one I have to keep?
That's your slate of 5 films, but only one can go on.
Yeah. I'm going to go with the Eternals.
Okay.
For a couple reasons. One, it's an unknown property to most everybody. Kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy was when it first came out. That was not a popular comic property at the time, but they had a lot of fun with it. They could play with it, work the characters the angle they wanted to, and had a lot of fun. And plus, they had a really interesting director attached to it. I think having Chloe Zhao as the director is fascinating. I'm curious to see what will happen. I like the fact that we've got Angelina Jolie, Richard Madden, who I really like as actor.
Okay.
Nanjiani, like you mentioned, is in as well. I think it's an interesting cast. I like the fact that I don't know what direction they're going to take with it.
Right.
So I'm probably the most fascinated by that. And if I had to keep one, that would be it. Black Widow, I have a prediction about Black Widow.
Really?
Should I say it on the show here? That way we can find out if in a year or so if I'm correct.
Absolutely.
Everybody is all concerned, which I thought was the same. Spoiler for Avengers Endgame. Can we go ahead and just say that this is a spoiler moment for the Avengers Endgame?
Yes, which I pretty much have already forgotten other than...
Well, it has to do with Black Widow.
Yeah. Right.
She's dead.
Right, yes.
So she died.
I did remember that.
She dies in Avengers Endgame.
Yes.
So... obviously, this film, they're saying, is going to be kind of a prequel. Now, right away, there's some problems with this. I think from a marketing standpoint, I think there's going to be a lot less interest in going to see a film that's not moving the Marvel Universe forward.
In other words, they should have done this before now.
That would be my thought. Here's my guess is that this film will actually show that the Black Widow we were following in Endgame was some sort of clone or some sort of... That's my guess. Because why in the world would they make such a big deal about this film if it's all it's going to do is go back and fill in a little gap of history? I don't see that as Marvel's way. I think they're going to pull.
Make me so.
Well, I can see the Chris Fry eye roll a mile away at that point. But I'm just saying that's my guess is somehow it's going to upend her death in Endgame to where she is still around. That is my guess.
Oh dear.
I'm laying it. I've got nothing to base that on off of just hunches.
Okay.
So Black Widow, I'm interested in the film, but take it or leave it. I am fascinated with Florence Pugh playing a part because I really liked her in Midsommar. The other ones I think all sound like interesting projects. I do like the idea of the Thor. The next one with Taika Waititi doing it again. That's going to be a lot of fun. Glad to see that the girl in Natalie Portman. God, I've got to get better with names. Natalie Portman coming back, I think, is really fascinating.
Well, yeah, because she
had a falling out with Marvel,
right?
And she wasn't really in any of the Avengers movies,
right? They referenced her at one point.
Supposedly, she was not happy with her role in the second Thor movie, and kind of got regulated to just being the girlfriend on the side. So she kind of broke up with Marvel, didn't have anything to do with any of the Avengers movies. Thor even makes a comment in one of the Avengers movies like, yeah, she's off doing something else. So it was kind of nice to see her make up and say, yeah, I'll come back and this is the part I'm going to play, and that's cool.
Right.
So all the other films sound interesting. I love the idea of a horror Marvel film. To me, the one I'm the most interested in is the Eternals because I know next to nothing about it, and they can really go in any direction they want to go with these characters.
See, I wish I could be, and you totally left out even mentioning again Shang-Chi and the Legend.
Well, that
of
one
the
sounds
Ten
interesting too. I mean, they all sound really interesting. Again, I'll see all of them. I'm a Marvel zombie. That's fine. I'll go see them. But if you're telling me I got to cut 4 loose, I'm like, well, let me see something I don't know anything about, and that's the Eternals.
See, the Eternals for me, that's the easy answer for me. Yeah. A, because I don't know anything about it, so I'm interested in that. But B, I'm hoping that they take
they adapt more of the game and model of that.
That's what I'm hoping. Because the other, I don't feel like I really need a sequel, which is what I consider to be Black Widow. Although I really like Taika Waititi's Thor thing, I feel like at this point that's kind of been played out. It may still be really good. Well, I hope it is. But I'm kind of,
Well, 3 of them are technically sequels.
Sequels, right.
2 of them are original. Shang-Chi, I think, will be really fun and interesting. That's probably my second most desired film of the 5. Just because I'm anxious for some original characters, some new characters to pop in and to take some interesting I like the idea of his film. It may be a little more grounded because he's not a super powered character in the comics. He's just really, really good martial arts and kind of a more grounded hero. So I'm kind of anxious to see if they take that same approach with him or not. But yeah, the Eternals, I'm really kind of just more fascinated by. And I mean, Angelina Jolie signing on to a Marvel film. I mean, whatever you may think of her as an actress, she brings a lot of clout to the project now that I think will be interesting to see what they do with it. So
yeah, and just a Marvel movie being made by the director of the writer.
Yeah.
That just is like,
which
what?
We both really like the writer a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a very slow film. It's a very beautiful film. But to make a film called The Eternals, which is basically people who are almost godlike in like powers and almost like a race of people, maybe hidden in our society now. It's just a fascinating match.
There. That's definitely a standout. So for my Shark Tank money, that's the one that gets to go forward.
Good. Well, we're looking at having that coming out here in a couple of years. I think that one is kind of slated for next November, 2020. So Black Widow is supposed to be in the spring, and then the Eternals will be next fall. So
on our website, themesh.tv, I think on the information page about Footcandle Films, it lists who is your favorite director, Alan.
Oh, it changes quite a bit.
But as to the website, I think it's listed as Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, he's one of my top 3 or 4. Yes. So Alfred Hitchcock, Martin Scorsese. I'd say probably now There Will Be Blood guy.
P.T. Anderson.
P.T. Anderson.
I know him on a personal basis.
Right.
I just call him P.T.
Those are Martin Scorsese, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So the trailer for The Irishman has dropped, Alan. Have you seen this trailer?
I have.
Okay. Starring Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci. It's going to be premiered at the New York Film Festival in September and then drop on Netflix shortly thereafter.
Yes.
Alan, feelings?
I think it looks promising.
Okay.
It did not dawn on me. It's obvious, but it didn't really hit me that Al Pacino's never worked with Martin Scorsese before.
I don't think I realized that either.
Yeah.
If you had asked me that, I would have gotten it wrong.
Now, unfortunately, De Niro and Al Pacino, they were together in Heat, really good movie. They had great scenes together in that film, especially the diner scene was so good at that. That was like the first time I think they were in a film together. They've done 1 or 2 more since then. There was like a really bad film called like Righteous Kill or something that they were in together.
Yes.
I kind of wish this was the first time they were in a film together and they were in a Martin Scorsese film. But as it is, this is the first time Al Pacino has been in a Scorsese film.
Okay.
They're using a lot of de-aging technology, which is a little concerning.
What I'm a little
concerning.
Yeah.
But we are looking at what the story of Jimmy Hoffa against a union organizer and just, based on real history. And I think it looks really interesting. The last kind of gang mobster film type thing that we had with crime, organized crime, was probably from Scorsese was what? The Departed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I thought was fine. It's not one of my favorite Scorsese films. And then I know he did Shutter Island, which I also thought was fine. What has he done since then? What did he do?
Well, he did Hugo.
Right. Yeah.
And he did Silence.
Which I never saw Silence.
I did, and it was well made, but it was really slow.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that big of a fan of it.
So this is him kind of getting back to the Departed territory, and then of course going back to Goodfellas, and you're going back to Mean Streets and everything else he did early on. No, I love that version of Scorsese, so I'm on board.
Okay.
I'm ready for go ahead and drop "Gimme Shelter" somewhere in the film, and give me the typical musical cues that Scorsese likes to use. We'll see if it pays off. I hope it's not a grab for. Okay, yeah, we're going to put De Niro in it. Oh, let's put Al Pacino in it. Oh, let's make it a gangster-related movie. I hope it's not just trying to put those little pieces together
one more time
to get that big Netflix opening weekend magic, and then it just doesn't hold together. I hope it's a good film, but I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah,
your thoughts? What did you think?
I'm leery of it, just because all I knew was I was getting a Martin Scorsese film on Netflix, and I was like, well, cool, But then the subject matter just seems to be so kind of typical to me that I don't know that I'm that excited about it anymore. But, it will be on Netflix, so I'll get to see it for free because I already have my subscription. So, why not watch it? But, so that kind of wraps up the news.
Okay, great.
You want to play a little bit of the trailer? And then
let's play a little bit of the trailer, and then we'll come in and come back for our recommendations here. So a little clip of the trailer from The Irishman.
Hello? Hi, my friend. I got that kid I was talking to you about here. I'm going to put him on the phone and let you talk to him, okay?
Completely forgot to mention that Joe Pesci's in the film, too, which is, again, you got to make the Goodfellas connection there.
Glad to meet you. Glad to meet you, too, even if it's over the phone. Our friend speaks very highly of you. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and come on back to our recommendations. And this is the part of the show where we like to each come up with one film that we think we want to make a recommendation that you should see. Can be an old film, can be a new film, but we try to generally say a film that you can turn off this episode, go to your home entertainment, TV, system, laptop, whatever, and actually watch. That's what we try to do instead of it being a film that you'd have to go find at a specialty theater that may not be available for you quite yet. So, Chris, with that in mind, what film do you have to recommend for us this episode?
So, hop back in the time machine.
Okay, I'm there.
And go back to the year 2008.
Oh, I remember 2008. It was a good year.
So, the film, a Catholic school principal questions a priest's ambiguous relationship with a troubled young student. You're like, you know what? That just doesn't really sound like something, it sounds like it's going to be very heavy. I just don't think I want to watch that. It gets Academy Award nominations. You're still like, you know what? I just can't. Well, that was me with Doubt in 2008.
Yeah. Sure.
It had Philip Seymour Hoffman, Meryl Streep, Amy Adams, but I still was like, plus I heard a lot of disparaging comments that basically the movie, which I believe was adapted from a play. John Patrick Shanley wrote the play, he then wrote the screenplay, and then he directed the film. That basically it was just very kind of boring because it was very stagey, as you would have guessed if it came from a play. And so there just wasn't a lot of camera movement. It just kind of lacked a lot of life. So I never saw it. Okay. Well, I recently caught up with it, and I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was really, really good. Maybe it helps a little bit by the running time. It's 144 minutes, so it's less than 2 hours for a drama. So you're like, okay. But just the sheer power of Philip Seymour Hoffman, Amy Adams, Meryl Streep, and he's not an actor, but I'm going to give him credit for being an actor because I feel like it is. Roger Deakins and his cinematography are kind of like the other actor in the film.
I remember it was a beautiful film. Yeah.
Yeah, I just really thought it was great. Great performances. Viola Davis actually has a very powerful cameo in it as well. So if you're looking for kind of an acting workshop just to see, this is the definition of acting.
Wow.
Well, here you go. All the performances are dead on. It's really good. It's well shot. It does make me miss Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's tough for me to watch any Philip Seymour Hoffman performance nowadays.
Yeah.
I even saw him in Mission Impossible 3 just not too long ago, which I think he played one of the best villains we've had in an action movie like that. And yeah, it's a shame that he's no longer with us. So he's good. All right, well, Dowd, I haven't seen it since it came out. I saw
so
it
you have seen
I did.
it.
I
Okay.
saw it. Yeah, I don't think I saw it in the theater. I think I saw it right when it went to rent.
Gotcha.
And I liked it. Yeah, I thought it was really good. I thought it was a well acted film. It's the acting and the screenplay that really makes that one sing.
Sure.
But I do remember it looking really sharp as well too. So that's great. My recommendation is of one that is probably a good surprise for anybody that knows me. I am not someone who does a lot of reading of fiction material.
Gotcha.
I read a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of, shorter articles and shorter essay things. So along with not reading a lot of novels, I also have never really gotten into Shakespeare, the works of Shakespeare.
Wait, you're going to recommend a period piece?
I am. Yes.
Am I going to want to see it?
There may be some elements of this you would
Okay.
like. Yeah. I'm going to recommend a film that's just came out recently. It's available online right now, but it is playing at some theaters.
Okay.
It's Ophelia, directed by Claire McCarthy. It is a reimagining of the story of Hamlet, which I'll go ahead and say, if you'd asked me to tell you the story of Hamlet before seeing this movie, it would have been a little sketchy. It would have been a little vague because I don't remember as much of the details. Maybe that helped me with my appreciation of this film. I don't know. But we have this film where it is a period piece taking place in the time that Hamlet would have taken place. And we have Daisy Ridley playing Ophelia.
So is it reimagined with lightsabers?
Yes.
Okay.
Did they not have lightsabers in the original Hamlet?
I don't think so.
Oh, see, there again. Probably something I would have realized if I'd actually read Shakespeare's work.
Gotcha.
Daisy Ridley, of course, from the Star Wars films, as that joke implied, as Ophelia. We have Clive Owen playing Claudius. And I will go ahead and say this. I think Clive Owen should play a mustache-twirling bad guy in every film now going forward. Because he was actually a lot of fun. He seemed to be having a lot of fun with his role.
So he needs to have one digitally inserted for Gemini Man that's coming out. Sorry, didn't mean to bring you down.
Yeah. No, that's the thing. The funny thing was I saw him play Claudius in Ophelia, and the very next night I think I was at the movie theater. I saw the Gemini Man trailer, and he's in it, and I'm like, oh, that looks like stereotypical bad guy. I wanted hammy, over-the-top bad guy that I saw the night before.
Gotcha.
We'll see how he does with that.
Sure.
Naomi Watts is in this playing Gertrude.
Awesome.
And then Tom Felton from Harry Potter fame. He played Draco Malfoy.
Oh, wow.
He plays Laertes. And we have a young actor I'm not familiar with, George McKay, playing Hamlet. But I'll tell you, Hamlet's in the film very little. This is all about Ophelia, his love. And as I'm told, because we did screen this film at one of our film screenings, as I was told by the audience afterwards, they made some major drastic changes with the ending of Hamlet, especially as it relates to Ophelia's character. So it is a true reimagining. Don't go in expecting this to be a pure adaptation. But the period piece side of it, the clothing, the costumes, the set design was all really, really pretty, really good.
Okay.
I like Daisy Ridley as an actress. I think she's fun to watch. I actually enjoyed the story. I followed it. I liked it. I liked the ending of it. So
do they still do like period dialect? So
it's light on the period dialect. It's very easy to follow.
Okay.
I think I even read somewhere they kind of did some more modernization. It didn't go contemporary. It's not like it's trying to be hip and irreverent. It's still Shakespeare type dialogue, but it's a much easier version of it to digest and follow. So I liked it quite a bit. I think it was great. It was a nice surprise for me. It's not one I expected to like. And I will say it's just a beautiful film to look at too. Well shot, a lot of great production design behind it. So that is Ophelia. And, the critics have been kind of mixed on it. It's been, I think the Rotten Tomatoes score is like in the mid-50s. So it's half liking it, half not. I don't know if the concern is that they took a little too many liberties with the Hamlet story or what, or maybe they didn't feel like it took enough. I'm not sure, but I liked it. I enjoyed it. If I was more versed in Hamlet, maybe I wouldn't feel the same way. But me being fairly much a neophyte in that area, I thought this was a very interesting film.
Cool.
So our two were Doubt and Ophelia. Both of it sounds like films that neither of us would have pegged that we would have enjoyed on the outset, but now we've watched them and we both are fans of these two films.
Yes.
So Chris, I think we've been going for quite a while and we need to go ahead and wrap the show up. So as a recap, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, we're both saying go check it out, especially if you're a Tarantino fan, although we both wish maybe the editor had a little more impact in the final running time. And Chris has some misgivings with the way the ending was handled. And then The Sword of Trust, I'm giving a very high recommendation to Chris, not so much. I think if you're a fan of the mumblecore type of films, you'll probably find something to enjoy here, but just Chris's opinion is it came out kind of slight and didn't really leave as much. It left a lot to be desired. I personally laughed quite a bit more than I have at a film in quite a while. And then Ophelia and Doubt are two recommendations. So with that, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Chris, people want to talk to us. They want to reach out and give us their opinions. How do they do that?
You can send us an email to info@themesh.tv with Footcandle in the subject line. You can also follow us on Twitter @Chris Fry, @Alan Jackson, and @Footcandle Al and I are also on the website Letterboxd. Please consider subscribing to this show on iTunes if you're not already, and leave a star rating or review to help us reach new listeners. We're also on Spotify and Stitcher. The 2019 Footcandle Film Festival is going to be from September 27th to 29th. There's more information about that at footcandlefilmfestival.com. Tickets are now available, so go there for more info about the festival, but also to see our schedule and to get tickets. It's going to be good. It'll be our 5th festival, so we're pretty excited about it.
5th festival.
Yes.
Wow. Crazy. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We announced our films. They're on the website, as Chris mentioned, and tickets are available now, so we hope you come out and join us that week in September. And, yeah.
Also, we don't normally are able to do this, but, Alan and I have been so production-minded that we can go ahead and tease our next show. We're going to be reviewing Last Black Man in San Francisco and Crawl. I'm going to state right now that I think my expectations are too high for Last Black Man in San Francisco, and I think I'm going to be let down just because I'm expecting to love the heck out of this film. So
all right, well, you've already set the gauntlet pretty high there.
I hope I'm not disappointed.
So we're watching Crawl. Did we decide on that?
I thought we did.
Maybe we did.
On our production meeting. Don't know.
Oh, yeah. I think I was awake during that meeting. No, that's fine. That's the big crocodile movie, right?
Yes, that is it.
Okay.
Which I've actually heard interesting things about.
Yeah, no, I've heard some pretty good things. Okay, so Crawl and Last Black Man in San Francisco. Interesting pairing.
Yeah.
Quite opposite films.
Yes.
But good. That's what we'll do. So, yeah, we'll be back in a couple weeks with our reviews of those two films, and we'll have some more recommendations and news items to share. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Remember, we're on themesh.tv, where you can find other podcasts and shows of interest. We encourage you to check it out at themesh.tv. That's THEMESH.tv for not only Footcandle films, but other shows. And go check it out and let us know what you think of the different programs available. Thanks a lot for listening. We'll talk to you next time.
See you in the ticket line.
Special thanks to Carpal Tuller for the show theme music. For more about Carpal Tuller, visit www.carpaltuller.com. You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.